Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Mindful in Minutes podcast. We are continuing on what I originally called the friendship series because I'm only asking my friends to do this. And I don't know if it's expanded more to like guest episodes, but today we are joined by definitely one of my dearest friends, Ashley Sondergaard. She is someone who is incredible. She is a longtime yoga teacher. She is an astrology lover. She's a certified health coach. She is also like one of my mom mentors. I remember she's someone that like when I was pregnant with pork chop and I had like mom questions, I was like, I know exactly who to go to. And it was Ashley. And she's also just like a great time. She was the woman who really, I think, gave me my first true introduction into like astrology and birth charts. So when I wanted to dive into Birth Charts 101, I was like, we need to get Ashley Sondergaard on the horn because you guys already heard, and this Ashley listened to the other Ashley's episode. Yeah. Ashley wins. And I don't know what it is about women named Ashley. They just love astrology. And so I thought, you know what? I need to get Ashley in here. I need her to give us the 101 on like birth charts. What are they? How does it work? How can you pull yours? How do you utilize it? How can you use it in different aspects of your life? And yes, Ashley, welcome to Mindful in Minutes.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Kelly. I don't know. It must be like, it's like the basic B Ashley vibe. Like we're definitely like Starbucks drinking. There was even, if you guys millennials listening, remember the show Recess? The mean girls were all named Ashley, like a bunch of like, I'm like, is that me somehow? Like, dude, I don't know.
Oh my gosh. You are not a mean girl, but do you know what someone told me the other day is they were like, oh, anyone named Kelly. And I feel like Ashley falls in the same category because no one is named Kelly anymore. It was like only people born from like 1989 to like 1993, like max, like this really specific. And I had like 3 other Kellys in my class. I was, Kelly S, Kelly W, Kelly J, Kelly, like all these Kellys, and then nothing, like Kelly's died. And so they were saying, and I feel like Ashley, even like Heather's, like I feel like there's these like certain
80s names.
Yes. And they were like, you know what? Those are going to become like the Mabels and the Esthers of our time when we're all going to be like 95 years old. And they're going to be like, oh, and the Bettys of like someone's generation, because they'll be like, well, no one's named like Betty anymore. No one's named like Gertrude. And like Kelly and Ashley is going to become that one day. And I was like, you're right. Because you don't see, it's not like anyone's just walking around with little baby Kelly.
Hey, that's like, so true. I'm not seeing a lot of baby Ashleys either.
Are there any Ashleys like in any of your kids like classes?
I don't think so. It is a lot of unique names, and I have all girls too. So I always am like, I'm curious about like what's the vibe of all their little girlfriends and all their names and like what are their charts? No, I'm just kidding. What are they?
You're like, okay, and your new best friend, what's her name? Okay, and where was she born? And do you happen to know what time?
Literally, text her mom.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. But I was trying to think back to, since it is like the friendship series where I just am like, I want to get my amazing friends on here and I just want to talk about like what we love and what like they're phenomenal at. How did we first meet? I know we first met in a professional capacity, but I can't remember. Was it Gina that introduced us? Okay, you introduced me to Gina.
No, our meet cute was the whole like during COVID. So when I taught yoga for 15 years, was during COVID, they shut down some of the studios as like all over, right? And so I had this freed up time because I was in leadership. I worked for Core Power Yoga for a really long time, was basically furloughed at home. And I'm like, I want to do some like trainings. And I'd signed up for one with you thinking like, because you were going to do it, I think in England, and you ended up having to take it online. So I'm like, oh, awesome. Like there's an online restorative yoga training. I'm so excited. So I ended up doing it. And I had to get up at like 3 or 4 a.m. because you were targeting a specific, UK demographic. And then come to find out you're in Minnesota. And I was like, wait, I'm in Minnesota. Like, should we be best friends? And then we actually started to out after that. And then we pulled in Gina because I knew Gina through like the podcasting world. And it was literally like so serendipitous that you happened to be in Minnesota. How funny was that?
Okay, I had forgotten about that. And it is so funny because that's exactly how it happened. I had to get up at like 3 a.m. and no one knew it at this point because I think I was maybe 7 weeks pregnant with pork chop, maybe
Yes.
like 8 weeks. Like I wasn't showing, but I just remember like every time we'd have like a bathroom break, I would go and try to like choke down some like sourdough bread because for whatever reason, like buttered sourdough toast was like the only, like one of the few things I wasn't like throwing up. And yeah, because I had to pull the plug. I like shared this story here before like once, but I had to pull the plug on. I had kind of this like UK like tour because what I used to do before you knew me, it was like be super nomadic. And this is like, and Ben was always in the hospital. I was just kind of doing my own thing, but I would be like, okay, I'm going to be in the UK. So I'm going to do, a few trainings like in Bristol, and I'm going to go up to Liverpool, and then I'm going to, swing by Glasgow and then come all the way back down and like finish up in Bristol again. And I had kind of like a little loop like that in Scotland scheduled for the end of March 2020.
Yes.
And like my mom was going to come, and it was this whole thing because like she loves Scotland. And my mom was going to be like a tourist during the day during my trainings, and we're going to hang out at night, all of this. And then I had to pull the plug like 10 to 12 days before I was supposed to leave because then like all the flights were grounded, everything got shut down. And I was like, what am I going to do? I also lost like so much money. I was so scared. And I just found out I was pregnant. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just try to run it virtually for people who still want to do it. And yeah, I like had to start my training at like 3 a.m., like 3:15 a.m. every morning. And that's right. I'd forgotten about that. And then, yeah. And that's how we met.
So we were like two peas in a pot. Like, who's getting up at 3 a.m.? Like, you're pregnant. I have 2 kids. Like, I'm at home that I was not planning to be at home with 2 kids, a stay-at-home mom, and I wanted to like do my training when they weren't awake. And so
I know. I remember you saying like, this is actually the perfect time for me because I can do like half of this training before my kids even wake up.
Everyone wakes up. Like, it was ideal. I mean, like, literally, could we not be any more similar? Like,
and then we just both, just yapping all the time, the gift of gab. And then we were like, okay, well.
And we pulled in Gina, and we have, I feel like it's like our little group of crunchy, weird weirdos in the best way ever. Like,
yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for refreshing my memory because I couldn't remember exactly, as you call it, what our meet cute was. And did you know Gina and I had kind of a similar meet cute, but I emailed her thinking she lived because, Gina, I was like, she doesn't live in Minnesota. I was like, Gina probably lives in like Bali or something. Or like, now where she lives, like in the desert, like talking to aliens and like having a great time is like very her. But I emailed her because I stumbled across her podcast and I was like, do you ever do virtual sessions? And there was something, I don't know, in like my email set, I don't even remember. Or I was like, do you do virtual sessions? Because like I'm in Minneapolis, so I'm in like central time zone or something.
Yeah.
And she was so confused because she was like, well, but I'm in Minneapolis. And I was like, what? And so she didn't understand what I was asking because she was like, why would you want to do? And Gina and I mean, we lived like, I don't know, at the time, like 9 minutes away from each other. And I was just like,
did you do them in person? Did you do your past life regressions in person? Yeah, I did my first ones in person. And I know she's pretty virtual now, but like,
I think she's like all virtual. I know. And I told her when we did her episode and I was like, Gina, you just used to like let people into your house.
No, I know.
Like, you're so trusting. She just like let me in. And then she gave me just like a house address for this past life regression session. And I was like, okay. And then I just show up and it's just like a house. And I was like, I hope this is it. I hope I'm not just like knocking on some like stranger's door. And it was. And she was like, come on in. And she had this room in her house. And it was
you
like
let people into their beds. Like, you join people nightly.
I do, but only via headphones. I think it's a little safer.
A little bit safer. Like, my literal husband, like, I'll be like, what are you doing? What are you meditating to? Oh, Kelly. Like, oh, okay, cool. Thank you.
Lately, I have been hearing so many people tell me that I'm basically like the third in their marriage because they like get into bed and they will like together pick like a sleep meditation and just like play it, and they'll hit play. And then like the two of them, I like to imagine I'm like laying in the middle, like softly speaking to everyone, like helping them sleep. And I'm like, what? what a special, tender moment. Like this couple is letting me into their bedroom.
That's helping. I'm sure it's so good for them too. Like, it's a cool thing to do together. I love it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we're here to talk about birth charts.
We are.
Even though we could chat about all of these things all day long. So before we dive into that, Ashley, tell us about yourself. Like, give us the TLDR. I gave everyone my personal intro. I think I forgot to say that you're like the self-care queen too. Not only are you like my mom mentor, but like when I think of like the epitome of like amazing self-care, I think of you. But tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do appreciate the self-care. So, like I mentioned, I've been teaching yoga for 15 years, have just really like latched onto this idea of we have a lot of autonomy and control of how we feel and what reality we create in our life. And yoga was that first opportunity to do that, to see like, oh, wow, like I make my choices about what I'm doing moving forward, what poses to take, even like what modifications to take. It just started to open my eyes to like what I could do and feel like on a daily basis. And that led into a lot of other things. Health and wellness is just an area that I'm so excited about. And during COVID, I was, like I mentioned, all of a sudden at home with two little kids for the first time, not ever planning to be a stay-at-home mom, but that's how things played out. And I felt like I really did sort of lose a little bit of who I was and was searching for these opportunities to come back to myself, whether it be through more meditation, yoga trainings, journaling. And I landed on astrology. And so I say I'm an astrology lover. I've studied astrology now since COVID. So, 4+ years or so. But I really love infusing those areas together, astrology, health and wellness, and have since done more training in specifically health coaching. So I'm a certified national board health and wellness coach. I don't do a ton of coaching at the moment because I work full time for a integrative medicine clinic and creating really premium health and wellness experiences, helping people take all parts of their holistic health together. So I've kind of like pieced all of these things together, and I love it so much. And then I do astrology readings once a week after my kiddos go to bed. And I just love to look at birth charts and, help people figure out who they are, especially in those moments when they're feeling a little bit of lost about, okay, who, I have my life in front of me, but who am I? How do I get back to that place? And the birth chart is truly, truly the map to do that.
Okay. And tell us what a birth, like if maybe someone has heard the word birth chart, they don't know what it is, because I didn't. You were the one that introduced this idea of like, I'd heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. And you were the person who first introduced this idea of the birth chart. So what is a birth chart?
So a birth chart is essentially a snapshot of the sky the minute that you were born. And why it's I think so fun to study a birth chart in astrology versus, say, just like reading your horoscopes or like even using predictive astrology is that a birth chart doesn't change. So it is the static snapshot of your first breath. It's looking at where the planets were, where they're in relationship to one another, where certain, other planetary beings, the sun, the moon, all different things, where they were when you took that first breath. And because they don't change, you're able to understand like, how does this impact me as one individual? And they're so specific because they are based on the exact place, exact time and date that you were born. Some of the pieces, so like the sun obviously changes every month, moon changes every few days, but things like your rising sign are changing every few minutes. So there is so much individuality as a part of a birth chart. And what I can show you, like I said, it's this map back to who you are. Preconditioning of life, preconditioning of kiddos and jobs and partners. Who is Kelly? Who are you at the end of the day? And how can you understand both the light part of that particular, piece in your birth chart, and how do you understand the shadow? So every single little planet, every single little whatever it is marker within your chart has both a light and a shadow. And that's where you get to start to study. How do I embody that light version of my sun sign? How do I understand how to potentially avoid, the shadow of my rising sign? What do I learn about this aspect within my chart so that I can learn to rise above and also give myself myself a little bit of grace, knowing that like, yeah, okay, I have this tendency and that's okay. It's not an excuse, but it gives me more information to work with and potentially grow.
Okay. And you have to tell everyone what your daughter said like the other day when she got in trouble at school. And what did she say? I will never forget this. And like your kids
Oh
are
my
so
God.
iconic, but you have to tell this story because everyone listening, Ashley has 3 girls and you can just imagine like one, what an amazing mom Ashley is, but just listen to this anecdote because you talking reminded me of what she said and it's truly iconic.
I first of all, like I kind of mentioned, like we don't use astrology as an excuse. And there is, I think, a world in which it's easy to say, well, I'm a Leo, so I just like a lot of attention. And like, okay, fine. But I think what we've learned is that you can really grow into this. So anyways, my daughter, she knows a lot about her chart. She is her moon is in her rising sign is in Gemini. And she was getting in trouble at school for just being a chatty Cathy. She's like a social queen. And she told her teacher, well, I'm a Gemini rising, so I talk a lot. And I think her teacher told me this. I'm like, Lily, you cannot use that as an excuse. First of all, like that your teacher's going to roll her eyes. And second of all, like, no, that's you need to learn to harness that. Like, that's not an excuse. If I ever hear you bring up astrology at school as an excuse again, like you're in big trouble. But it also like, I think it, to that point, like gives her a little bit of grace. So like she is a social queen. Like she sees the world through this lens of learning and conversing and having, really fun insight into what the world looks like through conversation. And so I can't really get mad at her about that. But yeah, using excuses is not okay.
Oh my gosh. That is so funny. And that really resonated with me because I am a Gemini sun. And I always see this meme that like floats around. Like, people send it to me. I see it all the time and it makes me laugh. And it's like, hey, neurodivergent Geminis, how's that career in podcasting going for you?
Oh my God.
Like,
really?
Yeah. And I'm like, wait. But like that is me because we love to chat. We love like a deep dive. We love to like hyper fixate on things and like just anyways. So I get sent that one all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I am a neurodivergent Gemini with a career in podcasting. What can I say? But I think so the thing that really stuck out to me about a birth chart, and actually I want to circle back briefly. Are there more than one type of birth? This is something I've been getting confused by with like the astrology girlies on the internet. Are there different types and what are the differences?
There's tons of different house systems. So yes, I use what's called whole sign houses, mostly because I think it's really consumable. The houses, and we can talk about houses in a bit, are just more evenly placed. And so someone like Chani Nicholas, who's a really popular astrologer, she also uses whole sign astrology. So I would kind of say like your astrology early on, pop astrology is often using whole sign houses. There are lots of other house systems. There's another really commonly one used called Placidus, where like if you use CoStar, you can choose that particular house system. So your rising sign in, say, a whole sign system might be different than, say, a Placidus system. There's lots of other ones too. There's even different types of astrology than kind of like the more Western astrology that I use, where I would say if you like what to do with that information is just find one that resonates the most with you. They're not going to be wildly different. Like some of the placements are going to be different, but if you find like, man, I'm really, really jiving with whole sign astrology versus Placidus, or I'm really understanding Vedic astrology versus other types of astrology, I want to go that route. Like listen to what makes the most sense to you, because there's nothing wrong. There's no right or wrong in a birth chart. It's really, kind of what resonates the most with you. But it would be a good question to ask an astrologer is like, what house system do you use?
Okay. And when we're talking about a birth chart too, we're talking about, for anyone unfamiliar, it's like that thing that kind of looks like a wheel, and then it has like numbers on the outside and then all these little symbols on the inside, and everyone's birth chart kind of looks unique with that. Even if you aren't sure exactly what a birth chart is, you've probably seen one or see a picture of one where it's like the wheel and then all these different little symbols and things, which we'll talk about in a moment, kind of put in there, and each birth chart is unique because it's sort of, the way I think of it is like the different organization of the symbols or like the planets and all of that. But everyone's birth chart will then look different because the symbols will be in different places and all of that. And I remember when I did a reading with you, and I was just curious. I think we were working a little bit more in like a professional capacity, and I was like, I want to learn more about like what you're doing. And you read my birth chart, and I remember I was so struck with how you described kind of like the big three, or like how these three like big players work. And so can you explain like what the big three are and how they work with each other? Because you have this great kind of like theater analogy that's always stuck with me.
Yeah, I can't take full credit for the theater analogy. I can't remember who actually, like, what astrologer talked about it in this way, but something I'll just kind of say about astrology and how the information is delivered is that there's a lot of really amazing astrologers out there, and the ones that I think plant the seeds of fear are maybe not the ones you want to go. There is a lot of negative, and even like CoStar kind of like falls into this category of like a little doom and gloom in astrology. Yes, it is good to know the parts of the birth chart that like you have opportunities. Like that's the point. And even in predictive astrology, like it's good to know if something's big coming down the road, like that's helpful. But there should always be a mutual respect and true just positivity to the information that's being delivered. And so I think when people come to me, like that's what they're getting is like, we're going to talk about your strengths. We're going to talk about the things that like light you up so that you can create your, like I said, like this reality, your life, you can create it with the mindset that you have these gifts. And so when I'm reading for someone and when we're talking about the big three and we're talking about all of these pieces, we're really tapping into like, okay, here is where you thrive. Here's where you shine. We're going to go down this particular rabbit hole. So when I'm talking about the big three, we're talking about sun, moon, rising sign. I'll come back to that in just a moment. The analogy we're referencing around theater, I'm a theater kid. I grew up this way, so this will forever land with me too. The planets, so if we're thinking the sun, the planets, they're the actors. They're the actors on the stage, right? The sun is your light source. It's your energy source. It's what brings you energy. It's what allows you to shine throughout your day. That's the actor. The costume that it wears is the sign that it's in. So I'm a Cancer sun. So my light source, my energy is wearing this costume of Cancer. Cancer is a nurturer. So I'm really energized through nurturing other people, like weird, through being a mother, through receiving, really like that feminine energy of receiving, manifesting, right? So the costume is the sign that it's in and learning more about that particular sign. And the final piece is the house. The house is the stage in which it is played out on. So I have Cancer sun played out in my fourth house. And each of the houses, there's 12 houses, are different areas of your life. And so you can, if you want to kind of get pretty familiar with these, you can just Google them. They're all, pretty consistent in terms of different house systems of what each house actually represents. First house being the physical body, the self, second house being money. So you can start to see like what each of these are. So that's where you're going to see these things played out the most, is that particular area of your life. So again, planet is the actor, is the who that person is. The costume that it wears is the sign that it's in, and the house is where it's played out in life. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. And that just always kind of resonated with me, of sort of understanding not only what these different things are, but like how they work with each other. So I remember when we first did a reading and you were looking at my chart, and I think you were laughing and you were like, oh, of course you're like a podcaster. Because and I can't remember exactly, like when I do readings and things like that, like I really take the information that resonates. Like I don't always remember the specifics of like, oh, because my north node, is here and opposite my, all of this. I just remember like the bigger lesson in that is I'll be like, oh, well, what I learned from like north node, south node is that my life lesson is I have to learn that like I don't have to do everything alone. Like I can rely on other people. Like I can open myself up. Like I can be collaborative. And so I always forget like the details of it, but I really remember like the lessons and the learning. And I remember you talking about how like my communication house has like a lot of activity, right? And also has to do with like my career and being, so my big three are Gemini, Sun, Capricorn, Moon, Leo rising. And I just remember the first time you looked at my chart, you were just kind of like laughing to yourself and you're like, so much about what you do, like makes sense to me now.
It's perfect. I mean, like, so we'll just like quick kind of overview and we can talk about the big three. So Gemini in the sun, right? You think about the sun as that energy source, energized through the idea of communication. Like we were talking earlier, being able to socialize through learning, through communicating, through messaging, right? Like it's energizing to be like that. Capricorn in the moon, so the moon is really where our emotional center is. I'll break these down a little bit further, but just to kind of give an example for people listening, Capricorn is the driver. Capricorn is like, okay, let's create the task list and then complete it, right? And so it feels really safe to do that, for you to be a boss, to be that like type A go-getter and actually complete the things that you set out to do. And then finally in that rising sign, Leo, to show up and to interact in the world in this very public way. I mean, like, hello, all three of those, like how hilarious is that? That's why I was like, when I look at people's charts, and I'll come back finally to our big three and talk about what those are. But I've never had a time where somebody's like, nope, that doesn't sound like me. I'll maybe, okay, one time with someone like, man, that really doesn't sound like me. And I'm like going through her chart and I'm like, man, what is this? This is so weird. Like, do I have the wrong time? What's the information? And finally she's like, pause, doesn't say anything. She's like, it sounds like my twin sister. And I'm like, what time was your twin sister born? Oh, the same time. Okay, well, there we go. So twins share the birth chart. And so I, for whatever reason, was just like reading for her sister. And like, if I would have probably had the sister in front of me, I might have been reading for the opposite. But like, it was just kind of wild. Like, oh, okay, thanks for that piece of information that you have a twin sister.
That is so interesting. And I remember there was one time you did birth chart readings. So a great like fun thing to do for a bachelorette party, everyone, I did this, is to have someone, Ashley, if you can, come and do like birth chart readings at like the bachelorette party. We did it for my sister-in-law and it was so fun. It was like so the highlight of the weekend. And I won't say like whose birth chart we're looking at, someone's birth chart. And I remember you just being like, oh my gosh, like look at all of this. Like I think it was tons of like Capricorn energy. And you're like, oh my gosh, this person has such like basically like assertive, like boss energy. And everyone was just kind of like laughing because they're like, really? Like that person, like this person that we all knew, were like, that's the person that had, because I think you were like, this is like CEO level energy. This is like, boss energy. And I remember you saying, because we were all just kind of laughing because we're like, oh, haha, like, I wonder if we got the time wrong or something. But that you also said that this is something that you can like grow into. So even though it's like a snapshot of your, life, the planets, the moment that you're born, it's something that you can grow into. So it's not like you necessarily, if your chart, if Ashley pulls it up and she's like, wow, this is like CEO level energy, that doesn't mean that like you come gallivanting out of the womb. For some people, it is like, even, Ashley has looked at like Pork Chop and Poppy's charts and like some of the things there, it's like you can already clearly see it, like that it's showing up and, and their most authentic selves. But for some people, it takes time to like grow into it. And it doesn't mean that just because that's a snapshot when you're born that you're going to be embodying all of these things. Like for me, it took a long time to be able to feel comfortable in more of that like Leo energy and like putting myself out there and not feeling like, oh my, like putting like one toe out there and then being like, and then running away. And so it's something that you can like grow and evolve into.
And study. Like we're saying, I think the world, especially as women, right? We're conditioned to be a certain way. We're conditioned to be small, to be quiet, to be a lot of things, especially as a mom. And I think where I just am such a lover of astrology in this way is that people can find themselves. Like, what are they meant to do here? And there's some parts of the birth chart, like lunar nodes, the north node is something that you are working over the course of your entire life. But, in the case of this friend, like maybe for some reason, just not really living out that version of themselves just yet. And it could take something like a simple birth chart or a little study of like Capricorn energy to wake that up. And for someone, again, who is just open to doing a little bit of self-study and understanding like, okay, what is it? Like, what are my gifts? What am I working with? There's so much that they can do and so many opportunities they can present for themselves when they believe that they have these abilities. And it gives them grace. It gives them a lot of validity. Let's talk about the sun in itself, because I think that's where like a lot of people will find astrology through just like looking up their sun sign. And while it's a huge part of the chart, it just isn't everything. And so we start with the sun because it is so, so important. It is, like I said, your energy source. It's who you are in the light. And knowing, what is that truest, highest expression of the sign that your sun is in is a great place to start. How do I embody that light version? And you can just Google a lot of these things of like, what is the positive expression of a Gemini? What are the shadow sides, right? What are the sometimes they're seen as more like stereotypes. I think we often stereotype the bad things of part signs. Like you think about like what Scorpio is often is stereotyped. Pork chop and his Scorpio energy like is like that like gothy, like dark energy. And like I'm all like Scorpios are unbelievably magnetic. They're the phoenixes of the astrology of the chart. They're just like out here to transform the world. And like, that's almost like too much power for our world. We don't even know what to do with that information. And so it's misunderstood. So often when you're seeing like, or hearing people have stereotypes, a lot of stereotypes about Gemini, right? Like all of them have their fun stereotypes. Those are often the shadows, right? Those are the ones that like, we're trying to kind of move past that or embrace it, but also learn how to step into a better version of that particular sign. So sun is where we're drawing energy. It's physical energy. It's energy to do the things that you want to do. It's where you shine. It's your essence. So there's going to be a flavor of your sun in pretty much everything that you do because it's a humongous piece of the chart. The next layer is the moon. The moon is really integral, like I talked to, the emotional well-being of who you are. Sometimes we think of it as like if the sun's who you are in the light, the moon is who you are in the dark, as you get to know yourself better. The people that are closest to you, your family members, your partners, they're the ones who are going to see this side of you. You may not even be super in touch with your moon because it takes a little bit of digging. Think of it as like your inner child. It's that part where you feel safe. And interestingly enough, and I love using astrology as a parent, as a mother specifically, but the moon represents mother. It represents mother in the chart, but also like mother energy. And if you think about that, like where you feel the safest, where our kids feel the safest is mother. And so knowing that part of your chart is where you let down your guard, is where you are truly able to just unleash emotions. Understanding what sign that in, what house that's in can be so freeing to say like, oh, okay, I have a fiery moon. Of course my emotions come through fast and furious. That makes total sense. And it happens to show up at work because it's in my 10th house. Like, okay, like I'm learning a little bit more. And what do you do with that information? Well, it gives you a little bit of freedom to process emotions in whatever way. So if you know, like, yep, my emotions come in fast and furious, okay, I'm going to give myself some time to do that, maybe through a workout or like literally like getting like dancing, like physical movement, getting emotions out of the physical body. If it's more related to like, say you have a water moon, there's just a lot of extra emotion there. It's just a big well of emotion. Give yourself time and space to kind of let it unleash. Give yourself a good cry. Give yourself that alone time. Air is really trying to understand air is an intellect. So it's like, what information am I gathering from these emotions? Learning to understand the emotion itself, giving that time to like study the emotion. And then finally, earth, it just takes a little bit of extra digging to get to the emotion, is like doing, there's your Capricorn moon, right? Is like doing some journaling work, doing some meditation. So when I'm talking about moon, it's really like understanding those emotions and being able to give yourself that freedom to feel in whatever way, shape, or form you are personally able to do so. And then the final piece, the final of the big three, is the rising sign. And this is actually the most personalized part of the chart. So from here on out, if you're listening to this for the first time and you've never done any astrology work before, start looking up both your sun sign in a horoscope and your rising sign, because your rising sign is actually the most individualized, specific part to your chart, because it changes every few minutes. So that's where we want to have the birth information, the time and the date as exact as possible, because this is the sign that was on the horizon when you were born. And what it's going to tell you is, one, it sets your houses into motion, because your rising sign is always your first house. And it's going to tell you how you interact with the world, which the lens through which you see the world, and the way the world sees you. And where I think this is so it kind of helpful is to know, like, okay, well, the world seems to think that, I'm a Leo. So like, how do I show up as like true celeb status? Because they think I'm a Leo, and I'm going to use that to my advantage. Like, maybe you aren't like truly, like you said, it took you a little while to like step into Leo territory, but like people have always seen you as a Leo, and you're bold and you're super bright. Like if anyone that has prominent Leo in their chart, they stand in a lineup and you're like, oh, there they are. Like notice those, right? And so having that understanding of your rising sign to know how people perceive you, you can use that to your advantage and kind of create your own reality. It's not like you're not lying, because you are that person. And also like, how again do you help create whatever opportunities you want for your future, knowing that people are like seeing you in a certain light? And you also have this lens through which you're seeing the world based on that particular sign. So there's a quick overview on the big three and what you can kind of do with those pieces. And there's lots of other planets, lots of other aspects. There's a gazillion other things you can look at in the chart. But if you're starting, those three are the easiest.
Something that I think really surprised me about my birth chart was when I learned I was a Capricorn moon. But once I realized Capricorn moons are calm, organized, focused, really into productivity, I was like, you know what? That does make sense. That's where my color-coded spreadsheets come out. And that's also where my need to be productive and to really want to enhance my mind, to boost my mental performance, like that's coming from my Capricorn moon. And the Capricorn moon in me loves Magic Mind. And you've actually heard me talk about Magic Mind before. It's something that I've been using for the last couple of years. It is this sort of brain supplement, and it's designed for long-term boost in mood, cognition, motivation, and stress management. I love the mental performance shot. It has this magic blend of 12 super ingredients that are clinically proven to support a sharper mind and lower stress and give you better energy. I find that I really kind of get that boost in energy and focus like an hour-ish after I take it. So I actually like to take the shot right before I take Pork Chop to preschool, and then I drop him off. And then when I'm back at my desk, it's like just hitting, and I feel like I'm dialed in and focused, ready to go. So when Magic Mind reached out and was like, Kelly, would you like to share Magic Mind on your podcast? I was like, yeah, absolutely I would, because I love it. I'm already familiar with it. I would love to talk about it. And I know what you're going to ask. You're going to say, Kelly, what does it taste like? And honestly, it tastes kind of like slightly sweet, like a little bit of like a honey taste, which I like. So if you're trying to really enhance your mental performance but lower your stress at the same time, go check out Magic Mind. And right now they have their New Year, New Brain sale. So subscribe and save 50%. One thing that I am always trying to focus on in my household is making sure that the house is full of healthy, nourishing options for food. And that can be challenging to find at the grocery store at times, or honestly, I get overstimulated in the grocery store. And that is why I'm so grateful to tell you about Thrive Market, because when it comes to getting food for my family, especially for the kids, it can be kind of tricky to find what I'm looking for in the grocery store, especially when I'm trying to find like healthy snack swaps to send with Pork Chop into preschool, or just keeping like those staples that Poppy likes now that she's eating solids, which is why I'm so excited to tell you about Thrive Market, because I've used them since before they were a sponsor on this show. Pluto, and they make it so easy for me to have like pantry staples and healthy snacks, and everything they offer is 100% non-GMO, and they have these great filters on the website where you can shop based on what's important to you and your family, like low sugar, gluten-free, organic, high protein, things like that. And they also have the Healthy Swap scanner in the Thrive Market app. And you basically can scan a product that you're used to buying, and it will instantly recommend cleaner, healthier alternatives. Like it recommended to me swapping pork chops graham crackers out for partake graham crackers, which I did, and he loves, and they have less sugar in them, and we're all happy. So if you are ready for a junk-free start to 2025, head to thrivemarket.com/mindfulminutes and get 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/mindfulminutes. thrivemarket.com/mindfulminutes. And why is it that the rising sign, I know you said that it's the first because it's like the planet that's on the horizon, right? But like,
Yeah.
what is it about that like, why does it get dibs to like be first?
Well, it's also like the planet that rules your house. Your first house is also your chart ruler. So it like has a lot to do with proximity within each other. And this is like kind of gets into a little bit more advanced astrology. So the first like sun, moon, rising are going to be like what we call our like personal pieces of information. The further you get out into other planets as well, even like, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, like you're getting a little bit less about the self and more about like, okay, now it's a little bit further to like your communities that you're in. And then it's almost like generation. By the time you get out to those outer planets, we're speaking to a generation because those move way slower. So it's the way the rising sign is changing so rapidly that makes it so important. Sun and moon are also moving quite frequently comparative to the other planets that are moving really slow. And so
like
that
Pluto, right?
Exactly.
Like Pluto's slow.
So like moves very slow. And so we have kind of like a swath, like a big generation that we can get information based on where their Pluto is. And we know more about them as like a grouping, if that makes sense, versus like your sun, your moon, your rising, which are changing and are super individualized to who you are.
Okay. That makes sense. And walk us through the houses, because you'll always see people being like, oh, if you have Gemini in your chart, look out because Gemini is moving into the 7th house and it's conjunct with this thing that's going into retrograde on the 14th at 7 a.m.
Like,
so make sure that you do your journaling and all of that. Like, what are the houses? Walk us through, putting you on the spot, but I know you know this stuff.
I know. And I want to look up, I have this like really good one like that explains it. I know them, and I like to explain them in a very like specific way, because there's, like I said, there's lots of ways, like lots of routes you can go with this. And so you have to land on what makes the most sense, but they generally have a general theme. So like I said, the first house being the physical self. It has a lot to do with the actual physical body. And so as someone who loves health and wellness, this is like a fun place to understand like your meat suit, your actual physical body, like what you're doing with that body, what you look like, your personality, but a lot to do with like the physical self. So first house is also your rising sign. That your first house will always be your rising sign. Second house is money. And these move from like the first house being like the sign of the self, the individual, into like further away from the self and eventually into kind of like the larger being as we get into the 12th house. So second house is the things that you have, your money, your earned income, your possessions. Each of these signs also coordinate with a specific, or rather each of these houses coordinate with a specific sign. So first house is Aries, second house is Taurus. They all line up in that way. So I'm just going to speak to the houses at this moment, but they do also coordinate in terms of like kind of what is their relation to signs as well. Third house is like your siblings, your neighbors. This is the area of like communication, writing, right? This is Gemini territory. Those things that are like gathering a little bit of information. Fourth house is your home. It could be your physical home. It could be like what you think of as safety, even just like your traditions, kind of that like family sense. Your fifth house is, I don't know if it's like okay to have a favorite house, but mine is definitely the fifth house. And it's the house of children. And what I love about the fifth house so much is that like it's also the house, this is Leo territory, is the house of joy, of creativity, of like literally creating things, and creating life lives in this same world, in the world of like self-expression and like joy. I just think that's such a cool idea that they all live in the same place. Sixth house is like your kind of like daily routines. If you're somebody who, again, because I love the world of combining these together, health and wellness and astrology. If you're looking at like what is the flavor of your daily routines, your workouts, like your, health, anything in that area, your sixth house is going to be really fun to look at that. Seventh house is your committed partnership. So whether it be like your business partners, but it could also be like your true partners in life. That's a great place to look at relationships, is in the seventh house. Eighth house is like one of those areas, this is Scorpio territory, that I think is really hard to understand. Mostly because, like I was saying, Scorpio is like hard for our world to understand. It's just like bigger than we can fully grasp sometimes. So this is like the tough things in life. This is the death. This is sex. These are the things that like we don't always want to talk about. But really think of it as like transformation. And it's also things like weirdly like taxes and insurance and like I don't know why, like the things that like nobody really wants to talk about sort of like lives in literally like taxes. Like sex and taxes, like what? Why are they in the same one? But it's like one of those things that like it's part of life, and we do need to talk about it in order to grow. We need to talk about death if we want to be able to understand that like, yeah, we all die at some point, right?
Okay. Is this why when I want to have a deep conversation, I have a lot of Scorpios in my life because I love them. We have the best conversation. Like if I want to talk about the meaning of life, if I am like contemplating some like really big issue in my life and I want to just talk about like the big stuff, like Daniela from Adventure, also one of my best friends, also a Scorpio. Like there's a handful of people that are like incredibly near and dear to my heart. Like they know all my secrets. They know like all of these deep, I'm not talking to, pork chop about, death, sex, and taxes, but, but even him, sometimes it's like, we have the deepest conversations. Is that just because like they're willing to go there? They're willing to talk about this stuff. Like, why is that?
I mean, I think too, it'd be so fun to like layer some of these, like these people that you love and you're so like connected with. And there's synergy is where you're able to like, or synastry rather, synastry is where you layer two charts on top of each other. Our friend Meredith does that. And it's just really cool to see why, like, what is it that these two, like the two of you, but in terms of like for you as somebody who has prominent Scorpio in your life, like you understand the nature of doing the heavy lifting in order to transform. So Meredith taught me that, there's tons of symbols for Scorpio out in the world. And, we hear about the scorpion. The scorpion's the zinger. That's the shadow. That's one sign, one little piece of Scorpio territory, when in fact there's tons of them. And my favorite is the phoenix, which is truly rising out of the ashes. And like I said earlier, it's people don't want to do that. Like they don't want to do the shadow work. They don't want to do the heavy lifting. And for you to feel comfortable enough around someone to be able to say like things that are like kind of wild and like maybe a little like out there, like that feels so good. And it also provides this ability to transform, whether it be like whatever you're doing, whether it be another person around you. I think people that are really in touch with the hard things are great manifestors. I mean, I know you are. Like you make things happen because you're willing to say like things out loud that are like really kind of scary that a lot of people don't necessarily do, right?
Yes, this is a thing that I have been told that I do sometimes. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. It is what it is. But I always have found that energy to be really interesting, and like how it's the eighth house.
Yeah. Eighth house is well, and to like the houses, they do, while they have like relationship to signs, you know, what I like kind of speaking about Scorpio is more so this like ability to transform. Whereas like the 8th house, you're going to see that this might be an area where like transformation is needed, or like that's kind of like a tougher part of life. If you can see like, okay, what sign is my 8th house? How do I understand a little bit more about where I have transformation in my life? Yeah, as you start to look at where your signs are, where your houses are, and like how those talk to one another, it starts to click. I will say, and we'll finish the houses, is that it does help for the very first time when you're looking at it for someone to read it for you. It's just a little bit confusing, but anyone can do it. You can get your chart for free. You can look at it. You can see like what sign is my 8th house in? Do I have any planets here? Do I not? I get the question a lot. People will be like, I don't have any houses in my 8th house. Is that bad? And I'm like, no, it's not good or bad. It's just that you don't have anything there. And so we have, you know, less information at that point, maybe less emphasis on that particular area. And we'll look to these other areas for more information. But there's no good or bad charts by any means.
Okay. I remember asking you that question. I was like, Ashley, why is my money house empty? I was like, should I be? No. I was like, should I be worried? Do I need to like contact like a financial advisor? Like,
you're
why is there?
Moon. You don't got to worry. You're good.
Yeah. I was like, why is that house dead? There's nothing in there. But yeah,
it's not dead.
Okay, that's
just a little less oomph.
Yes.
So 8th house, you said kind of that like area of the dark, of the magic. The 9th house is really looking at like goals, religion, like a higher, like I told you, this kind of gets more like esoteric as we get to like the later houses. So think of it as like spirituality, philosophy. This is travel. This is the area of like getting out of your comfort zone, experiencing the world on this like big level. This is related to Sagittarius energy. And I love to share this, like Taylor Swift is a Sag. And like, think about how much hope and knowledge and true like expansion she creates in our world as a Sag. Like, whoa, it's just, I mean, that's when we think about like what is like truly spiritual, like the mother, right? It's like someone who expands our world in that way. And so when you're looking at your 9th house, you're really looking at like, okay, like trips and getting out of your comfort zone and expanding what you're able to even fathom in your mind. 10th house is a little bit easier. It's career. It's your career path. It's like the things, your public roles. It's the things that you do in your profession. 11th house is like your social groups, your friends. So it's continuing to get kind of wider. And, you know, really think about this as like your good friends, but also could be like social networks even. And then 12th house is like one of the places that like is so hard for us to grasp, kind of like Scorpio, but it's essentially like behind the scenes. Like I like to think of it as our connection to heaven, our connection to God. If you're a believer in something bigger, right? Is like, we can't see it, but we know it's there. And that 12th house, we don't always have language for what's there and why things are happening in the 12th house. But it's there. And we need to make sure that, you know, we also are aware of like that connection to something that we can't always see. So each of those houses, 1 through 12, they all have different representations. There's lots of amazing like explanations for these too. You can look and just see, they'll just list them all out. Some of them are super random. I'm like, this happens to fall in this place. And you're like, what? Okay, well, good to know.
Okay. And then based on like where your planets are placed within those houses, it'll give you more information as to maybe like where your area of transformation is, or like what your strengths could be in partnerships or in community or, you know, travel, expansion, things like that. And then you can kind of get this like personalized, curated idea of like where your strengths are and also like your shadows as well, right? Like a big Gemini shadow is always that we're like super like two-faced and flaky and like gossipy. And like, don't get me wrong, like I never want to be gossiped about, but this is one of my shadows. But like, you know, if I'm at Thanksgiving dinner and I hear someone, you know, starting a little gossip about whatever family member isn't there, like I'm not necessarily going to engage, but my ears are going to perk up. I'm going to be like, ding, like, huh, what's that?
Oh yeah, over there. You're also human, like.
So, you know, I'm just like, oh, what? Oh no, I haven't heard about Aunt so and so and what happened. I'm like, tell me the story. Tell me more. But yeah, that's always like the shadowy side, is that we're just like super flaky and like two-faced, but I think it's just more like
that version.
I think it's like curiosity killed the cat a little bit. Sometimes, at least for me, where you're just like so curious, want to learn, like want to talk, want to hear like what's going on, just so curious that like it can get you into a little bit of
and also
trouble.
Think about it like two-faced, but also like you also see both sides of the coin. Someone that is Gemini is able to say like, yes and yes, this is true and this is true. And we know, we just went through an election cycle. Like we know that there are layers to everything that we're talking about, right? And so when we're just so believe in one thing, that's not always true. And I think like what's really cool about Gemini is they see yes and yes. These all can be true. You can have multiple beliefs that potentially, overlap a little bit. And we need open-mindedness in our world because yikes, if we didn't, right? Like we're welcoming others' opinions in. We need that. So I would think of it less of a two-faced and more of open-minded.
Okay, I appreciate that, like reframing of everything. And there's two things kind of on my list. And if there's anything else that you want to chat, I could chat all night about this stuff, but I want to hear about like what someone might use a birth chart for, or maybe even like trends. Like what are things when people come to you for like the first time and they're like, Ashley, like, can you read my birth chart? Or like, what is this? Can you help me understand it? Like, what do people tend to want to use their birth chart for? And then after that, I want to talk about some of the really cool things that you can do in terms of using birth charts and like relationships, or like your birth chart with someone else's birth chart.
Most people, when they come to me, mostly because this is kind of like the type of astrology that I use, is like they're curious to know about like what are more like routines that they can build into their life. What are some things that they can do to embrace who they are? I think there's this like general idea of like, I'm just looking to be the best version of myself, right? And that is so like, that's what the birth chart does. You might go to somebody who has a little more expertise in like career. Like you can have a career astrologer be like, okay, I want you to dive into every aspect. Let's really get into like how these planets communicate with one another. So we're talking again, like astrology, baby astrology today. We're talking like this three bigs at the very beginning, but then they start to like continue. You can study your birth chart endlessly. So it really just depends on kind of like what you're curious about. If you're wanting to know what are some, relationships that would be helpful, like how do you play on those strengths that you have as a part of who you are in relationship, like where you can study that further. But when people come to me, they're often looking like, I really just want to know like who I am and how do I tailor this information into my routines, into being kind of that like that bitch. Like, sorry, I don't know if you swear on the show, but you can take it out. Like,
I've only ever had to put the E. I'll give you one guess who was the one that got the E for explicit on the episode. It was, we know her, we love her, Gina. Could not stop swearing. And I was like, really? I'm going to leave all this in. So you will be in Gina's club. And I was like, Gina, like, I really like, I don't know. I've never had to, I don't even know how to do the button for like E for like explicit. And then I think we got 15 seconds in and she's just like F-bombs everywhere. And she's like, oh, the one rule was I wasn't supposed to swear. Like,
I don't feel like the B word is like too bad yet. So like maybe you can get one pass. No. You'll be okay.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's my one pass.
No.
But that like that version of yourself that like you want to be that person, right? And I have it in my little like phone notes of like, this is who I want to be, right? But sometimes people just don't know who that is and they want a little bit of guidance. And so I think that's where I see a lot of people, and also a lot of friends gift them to others who are just like, this is just like such a fun thing to do, just to be seen, just to feel a little bit of validation. So I'll do like a lot of like girlfriends and, gifts. I don't feel like I do like a ton of men. But that I would totally do men too. It's just, I have to like
haven't caught on as to like how much fun this is.
I did like a lawyer, like this really cool woman and her like lawyer husband one time. And like, I was like, he's going to hate this. And like, he was super excited. So
oh my gosh, that's funny. I think the big thing for me, all of this, like, I'm like, again, Gemini, yes and yes. And I when I first wanted to get my birth chart read, I was one, curious, but also I was just like, I want to just know more about myself. I don't even know if I had like a set intention of like, even how do I incorporate this into my routine? I am always trying to just learn more about myself. And like, we as people are so deep and so complex, and like, there's so much to us. And I'm always just so fascinated by like, I don't know, what is there about me, or like, what is there about you? And so many different, whether it's like, I talked to like my therapist about this and just all of these things like nature versus nurture, and then birth charts. And there's all of these things that you can utilize to just know yourself better. And it can be validating and also, I think, expansive at the same time, because then you see, like, I never really knew this like Capricorn moon part of it. Was always there, but I didn't even know this like existed. And you were like, Kelly, this makes so much sense. Like, this is the part of you that makes like the color coded, spreadsheets for like your podcast, so that you make sure that you never, repeat something or have something too close to one another. And then you color code it and it, makes sense to you. Like, that's that part of it. And that does feel so comfortable and like safe for me. But I never like, I don't know, it allowed me to see that part of myself and to be able to like sort of lean into it and recognize that that was like a strength or like a skill that I had. And that is something like having those systems and having that little bit of like type A to a degree was something that like really played well with other, like my son and even my rising, but that could be a strength that I had. And I just, that for whatever reason, that one really clicked with me. I was like, oh my gosh, like I do feel safe there. Like I felt really seen and validated, and I just learned more about myself. And then the other thing that I want to talk about is birth charts and relationships, because something that I love to gift a birth chart reading, whether it be for like a bachelorette party, but something that Ashley has actually done for me at the birth of both Pork Chop and Poppy, is she gifted my birth like gift was a birth chart reading for Pork Chop and Poppy, because obviously once they've been born, then 10 seconds later I could be sending her being like, okay, yeah, here's the location, the time, and all of that. And not only is that like, I think the best like new mom gift is like having someone read like your baby's chart in a way, but I remember you did this thing where you looked at my chart and you like compared it to Pork Chop's chart. And then you did this really cool thing after Poppy was born where we looked at all three. And I remember you were able to not only talk about like, my chart and Poppy's chart and like what that meant for like, not only how I show up as a mother, but like maybe how she perceives me as a mother, but then looking at that sibling dynamic. And I'll always remember, and this was so like special to me, but you were talking about how like, where Poppy's sign, I don't want to give, I don't want to read her whole birth chart here, but I remember it basically indicated that like she's going to be Pork Chop's safe space.
Yes,
and
I
like
remember
safety and comfort, and that just was like so, because you bring another child into the world and you're like, I just hope that like they get along and they love each other, and that they accept their sibling and all of that. And it just was really this beautiful practice to look at different people's charts and their relationship to one another. Whether I think we automatically think like, oh, I'm going to get my partner or my boyfriend's or, girlfriend's, chart and see like, what's going on. But you can do other relationships. You can look at, your parents, if you have that information, your children, you can look at siblings, best friends. Like there's these different ways that you can look at people's charts and see how you can support one another, like what it means. But if you could speak to that, because I haven't really had anyone, especially, and I think because you are a mom, like you really have such a great perspective on like the mom child kind of relationship and like the sibling relationship. But I'd just love to hear more about how you can use birth charts and relationships.
Yeah, that was fun to look at theirs. So a couple things about reading other people's charts. I get the question a lot about, okay, like people are dating, right? Like, is it okay to look at charts, right? Is it okay to text mom on the first date for like their info? So I really don't encourage diving into birth charts in dating, because you're probably going to get discouraged by something you see, and you might literally be shooting yourself in the foot, because if everybody is perfectly compatible, if we have, if you're seeing somebody for the first time and their chart is like absolutely perfect and you're like, yep, this is it, it's probably going to be kind of boring. Like that relationship, like great, that might be perfect, but it also might be like literally so boring. I think people that have a little bit of crunch in their relationships, that have some friction, that have potentially, non-compatible signs, things that aren't quote unquote supposed to be together, are the best ones, right? And so don't overthink any sort of birth chart, synastry relationships too soon. The other thing is like, it isn't really super fair or ethical to be looking at other people's birth charts without their permission. Now, there are some exceptions, your own kids, right? Like totally fine, your partner, your parents, like your close family, and maybe even like a really good friend or something if you have like their information. But you should really be asking people to look at their birth chart because that's their information too. Now, kiddos are my favorite area to do this because one, if you are a parent, you literally created them out of your body and you get to look at their birth chart. What's so cool with kids, and as a parent specifically, I've learned how to really validate my kids. And also I understand, like you were saying, how they see me and how I can best parent them. Now, the place that you're going to look for this is their moon. Okay. So I'll use my daughter Lily as an example. So she is a Leo moon. And so she sees me as this Leo. And what we've talked about Leo today quite a bit, Leo is really bright and shiny. Leo shows up really big. Leo is so fun and so magnetic. It's so joyful to be around. But the shadow of Leo is like kind of an attention hog. And I know this about her. And I know this about me, that like, I'm kind of an extra. Like when I walk into daycare pickup, like in my shenanigans, like talking astrology, like that could be way too much, especially for her, right? For her to be like, Mom, and she's getting to that age now, like she's 8 and she kind of eye roll me and like be like, Mom, you're being over the top, right? So like I know this about her and about me. And so I'm not going to change who I am, but I am going to maybe pull back a little bit and give her the attention because that's really important. So I know by looking at her moon sign, how she views me, right? And so if you have kiddos, you can look at their moon sign and you can study that particular sign to understand a little bit more about what are the shadows and what are the light expressions of that particular sign. How can you embody the light of that? Is it going to be perfect? No, but it does just give you a little bit, I think, an advantage as a parent. It also, if you look at your own moon sign, you can see like, how do you view your mother? What is your relationship with your mother? If you have maybe some healing, maybe some reparenting to do, that can be an interesting place to study a little bit. When we're talking about relationships kind of to other people too. So we're talking your coworkers or your dating or your marriages or whatever. There's one place that I do think is really fun to study within the birth chart we haven't talked about yet, and that's Venus, because that can tell you what you value, what's important to you, like what do you truly hold near and dear to your heart. When you have an understanding of what that looks like, what, just on a base level, what is that sign, what sign is Venus in for you? You can understand like, what do you really value? And if you are potentially, starting to date or you're in a marriage and you're working on that marriage piece, like understanding what you value is just such a good, helpful tip. So lots of places that you can go within the birth chart to understand, more, but those are some of my favorites is the moon with kiddos, Venus for yourself, 7th house for relationships for sure. Like you'll get a little bit more information. What sign, are there any planets there? Like, are they aspecting other things? But that's a little bit further on the road. So even just like looking at the moon, man, you can get so much. You can get so much from those first 3 signs. I'll give everyone a resource. If you're getting started in this, Channing Nicholas has a book. It's called You Were Born for This. And it breaks down those 3 in this like just amazing, like consumable way. I really recommend that book. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That I'm like immediately when we're done going to add that book to my list and then also be like, where is Venus in my chart? Because I'm just so curious. And I remember you saying and that looking at your children and where their moon is tells you like how they're going to perceive you. And it was so interesting because I was looking at, my kids like different moons, and basically like Pork Chop is going to see me as like more stable, calm, comforting. And then Poppy is going to see me as this like free spirit, just kind of like, and then, mom, she's like off with the monks again. Like, no, I actually can't call my mom right now. She's taking a vow of silence. Like she's off like barefoot in a field or something. And it's just so
cool though. Like,
and it's just so interesting. And I really love what you do, like with like relationships and things like that. And I said it before, but I'll say it again. Like I think the best like new mom gift that like is always a slam dunk is getting like mom like a birth chart reading for like her and her new baby, because then they can kind of like, you can just learn a little bit more about this new family member and all of that. Is there anything, Ashley, that you think I missed? You are the birth chart queen in my life. Is there anything when I told you, Ashley, I need help doing birth chart like 101, come educate me? Is there anything that I missed that you feel like we need to know about birth charts for this 101 level?
So I think the only thing that I would say is just like, remember to use it in a way that is uplifting. I think it can get really quick. Like I had mentioned earlier, there is a little bit of like a pessimistic vibe sometimes to astrology and to people, giving you information. At the end of the day, you always know what's best for yourself. You know what's best. You know what your gifts are. You know who you are. And sometimes it takes a little digging. Maybe it takes someone to kind of enlighten that for you, but you're the ones who really get to make that choice about how do you show up in the world? What decisions do you make? And as you get more into astrology, sometimes it can be fun to use, apps and look at like the future of what's coming down the road. And I think that's so exciting. And I do love to know, okay, well, Mars is going to be retrograde. Like this is going to be not my favorite, but we also have to, we have autonomy over our life. We have free will. And that's where, our choices come in. Do we choose to show up as that positive, that light-filled version of our birth chart, or do we choose to show up as that shadow? And the more that you know about who you are and the more that you trust yourself, the more you get to make that choice and you get to truly choose like what is your future? What is your destiny? It's not completely laid out for you as like some people might like to think. It's really within your own hands. You have that free will of who you are.
Oh, amazing. I love that. Perfect place to end it. Ashley, tell everyone how they can connect with you, how they can work with you. How can they now gift all the new moms in their life, like a birth chart reading for themselves and their babies and all? Tell us everything.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kelly. I love chatting per the usual with you, but especially talking about these things. They're just honestly so helpful in my life, and I hope they help you. So I used to do podcasts called Yoga Magic. If you want to do some deep dive into all of this, self-care, astrology, there's about 2+ years of episodes, have since paused doing that, but I do readings once a week after my kiddos go to bed. So you can check me out on ashleysondergaard.com. If there's ever a time it's not available, just shoot me a message and we can find a night to do something, because I do love doing these readings. And yeah, I just love learning more about people's charts, whether you want to do a birth chart for yourself and then just tack on a kiddo at the same time. We can totally do that if you want to gift it for somebody. Open to kind of everything in those birth chart territories for you.
Amazing. And I'm going to link to everything that Ashley is doing, all of the things, Instagram, website, Yoga Magic. It is a phenomenal show. Great episodes over there. And Ashley, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us. And also thank you for being such a beautiful friend in my life. You're someone that I think of often, and you just bring such like warmth and joy into the life, into my life and into the world. And I'm just so grateful that we had that little meet cute. And
me too.
I don't know, that the universe brought us together. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being in my life.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. This was so fun.
Oh, so fun.
Woohoo!